Newmark property, but he was unsuccessful in acquiring control of the land. I suspect he was paid off by the company, about the only way they could do to protect their claim. The Puget Sound Agricultural Company maintained a small farm at Newmark to the mid-1850s. It was clearly of less importance than the field headquarters at Tuliplo. This situation changed drastically in the fall of 1855. The outbreak of the Puget Sound Indian War caused an upheaval in the network of outstations. PSAC employees left the outlying farms for the security of Fort Nisqually and various blockhouses. To protect the company livestock, Dr. Tomey sent Edward Huggins to Newmark to watch over the herds. It's kind of interesting. Huggins writes about this years later. He said that as the war broke out with the Native Americans, the company employees fled their stations and came back to the Fort Nisqually. And Dr. Tomey was getting desperate because he needed some leader, that educated man that could kind of oversee the other workers and stay out there on the farms. And finally, I think reluctantly, Huggins agreed to do it. And it later helped his career. He was promoted later because of this. But in any case, with the arrival of Huggins, a team of researchers concluded Newmark Station became second in importance only to Fort Nisqually for the PSAC on the plains. Here's a picture of Edward Huggins, and I think it's really due to this man that we know so much about the Hudson's Bay Company and Puget Sound Agricultural Company. Because years later, he wrote everything down. He wrote them in letters, he wrote them in stories. He preserved a lot of information that otherwise would have been lost. Edward Huggins, who is seen on this slide, described life at Newmark in his reminiscences. Quote, "There was a large log house on the place which stood on the south side of Mud Creek and about half a mile from the timber. Myself and the hands, some 20 in number, lived in this house during the war. I pastured about 2,000 sheep from Mug House, which were herded by white men and Kanakas. And Kanakas means Hawaiians. I also had a large lot of sheep, cattle, and horses at other stations on these plains, and for 2 years I would make weekly horseback trips around the stations, a distance of 30 or 40 miles, and not set eyes upon a human being except our own men, and then parties of volunteers who were out scouting for Indians." And it's interesting, he adds that the volunteers, the territorial militia, the American settlers, often threatened Huggins because they saw him as a foreigner supporting the Indians. Huggins remained at the Newmark outstation until 1859. He married Letitia Ward, daughter of Chief Factor John Ward, during this time. In July 1859, Edwards took charge of Fort Nisqually, replacing Dr. Tomey, who left for Fort Victoria. Another PSAC employee, William Spence, assumed charge of the Muck Farm. Here's another recent view of Newmark. The outstation retained its importance after the end of the Puget Sound Indian War in 1856, perhaps because of the conflict over the ownership of Tuliplo Farm. In any case, the Newmark station, as some researchers describe, still served as, quote, the supervision and distribution center for agricultural operations on the Nisqually Plains. Can you hear me okay with this microphone? Okay. The significance of Newmark Farm is documented by PSAC records. Houses, barns, and stables are noted in the surviving Muck journals of 1858 to 59. In addition, there are references to a carpenter shop, chicken coop, kitchen, storehouse, and granary. Major crops included wheat, oats, peas, and potatoes. I think it's kind of humbling because you think of all these buildings, you go out there and there's nothing standing. The last years of Newmark outstation are poorly known, but most likely the farm was increasingly affected by American pressure. In 1869, the Puget Sound Agricultural Company sold all of its property rights, including title to muck, to the United States government. An American settler, Henry Candle, homesteaded the Newmark site in the 1870s. According to Edward Huggins, Candle used some of the old PSAC buildings during his occupancy. Okay, my third and last example, actually this is my favorite outstation, because it was so forgotten to actually fairly recently, is the outstation called Tennequa, which was located south of the Nisqually River in present-day Thurston County. The farm, as you can see on this 1850s land survey map, was situated on the fertile Tennequa Prairie, just east of the Deschutes River on the trail connecting Cowlitz Farm and Fort Nisqually. And this is the Deschutes River right here. This Clear Lake is McIntosh Lake now. It's in South Thurston County, it's fairly close to the town of Rainier. There's this trail from Cowlitz Farm to Fort Nisqually, crosses here. There's still a road there, it's called the Military Road. And just as you cross over, this area right here is Tennequa. Right in here.
You better spell that.
Okay? Sure. Tennequa is spelled T-E-N-A-L-Q-U-O-T. The name Tennequa most likely comes from the Native American term Tennequa. The term means the best yet, and it relates to a Nisqually tribal migration legend. The pasture was good at Tennequa, a fact appreciated by the Puget Sound Agricultural Company. The British enterprise kept purebred sheep at the farm. Worn-out horses from Fort Nisqually were brought there for recovery. In addition, Tennequa served as a way station for company employees traveling between Nisqually and Cowlitz Farm or Fort Vancouver. The origins of the Tennequa outstation are unknown. Sometime during the 1840s, the Satellite Farm was established. During this decade, the Puget Sound Agricultural Company built a blockhouse at the site. You can see the structure still standing in the circa 1916 photograph. According to historian Steve Anderson, the small building resembled a blockhouse that was erected around 1844 at Fort Nisqually. The Tennequa structure was used as a granary and storehouse for many years. Fire destroyed the historic building in the 1930s. By 1848, a man named Matthew Nelson oversaw the farming outstation at Tennequa Prairie for the Puget Sound Agricultural Company. He deserted his post in the company on September 22, 1849. I wouldn't be surprised if it had to do with the California Gold Rush. Several weeks later, Thomas Linkletter, whose portrait is seen on this slide, took charge of the Satellite Farm. In fact, Thomas Linkletter worked for almost 2 years as company manager of the Tennequa station. The Orkney man, he came from the Orkney Islands north of Scotland, supervised the production of crops and raising of livestock. Sheep were particularly important, with over 2,600 of the animals at the farm in June 1850. Here's a current view of Tennequa Prairie, a very peaceful scene. It's still used for pasture land. But in the mid-19th century, company activity here and elsewhere south of the Nisqually River was on shaky ground due to American pressure for land. Even as early as November 1848, Americans at a public meeting in Newmarket, a community later known as Tumwater, demanded that the PSAC remove their livestock from south of the river. Tennequa Farm continued its operations for several more years, but Americans' opposition to the outstation did not fade away. Chief Factor James Douglas at Fort Victoria finally agreed in 1851 that the company should abandon the site. Here's another recent view of the Tennequa area. Dr. Tomey complied with Douglas's directive and closed the Tennequa station. The Fort Nisqually Journal on September 11, 1851, recorded the actions that were taken. Quote, Feander and Topoi off to Linkletter's with oxen and wagon for a load of wheat. No more sheep to be sent to Tennecoit. Linkletter services no longer required. Charles sent to bring home the horses are with Linkletter and belonging to the company. Thomas Linkletter retired from the Puget Sound Agricultural Company and took a donation land claim on the Tennecoit outstation site. Both Thomas and his Native American wife Mary stayed at Tennecoit, becoming successful members of American Frontier Society. They continued, however, to keep social and business ties with Fort Nisqually for many years. While Mary Linkletter died in 1884, Thomas passed away in 1890. The couple was buried near the old blockhouse on the Tennecoit farm. And in fact, in this slide, right, I took the picture, and it's right behind me to my left are the gravestones for Thomas and Mary. Each of the outstations possessed its own unique history, but all had close and ongoing ties to the PSAC headquarters at Fort Nisqually. There is still much that we do not know about this farming network. Possible avenues of future research include archival study of land ownership records, archaeological testing of site boundaries, linguistic review of place names, and even field identification of environmental changes brought on by PSAC operations. In any case, further study of these outstations would lead to a better understanding of PSAC's corporate farming, Fort Nisqually, and the cultural landscape that helped shape the origins of Euro-American life in the Puget Sound region. Thank you for listening.
Can you back up to that, about the second slide? Okay. I think we can find Lakewood on that map.
Okay.
About the second from the
American Lake, and Gravelly Lake, and Silicon.
Yeah, I'd like to answer questions, Phil.
there. Where's American Lake?
You want a
This-
pointer?
Can you see it up there?
American Lake,
Okay.
Gravelly
Gravelly,
Lake, Silicon Lake.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's Heath up here. That gives you a clue. So Lithwell's right
What did you
here.
call that one up there?
That's Heath's, Stillicum Farm,
Okay.
where Fort Stillicum is. I think, as you said, this is gravel. You know this area more than I.
That's Silicon Lake.
Yeah, Stillicum
And in
Farm.
the middle there is Gravelly Lake, that's American Lake.
And then there's Fort Nisqually down at the end of the creek there.
Yes, right here. It's Ecology Creek.
And Buck Farm?
Buck Farm is Old Muck and New Muck right in here.
Now, Twithlow or,
T-L-I-T-H-L-O-W.
The Lithlow. It's right here.
see, that's getting right into around McCord right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right between McCourt and Madigan.
Yeah, it's on Fort Lewis property, but it's right in there. But you can see there's a whole ring, and there's other names that we can't even identify. And but it was a very active company. I mean, every day they carried out many operations. And one of the thoughts is that people at Fort Nisqually all stayed in the fort and waited for the Indians to bring furs to them. But no, they were out there doing different things. And many of the employees were married to Native Americans. They worked with Native Americans. It was a pretty intensive operation that lasted for decades.
Who started the Heath Farm? That was started in 1840, 41.
The thing is, no one knows. Okay, the Red River settlers. That's a big subject, and I can get into this. Let me take this all the way back and turn it off to cool down a little. Okay. The thing is, the Hudson Bay Company realized that the American settlers were coming in. And so they wanted to maintain the area, particularly north of the Columbia River. They realized south of the Columbia River, there was no way they could hold on to that territory. The Willamette Valley was being rapidly settled by Americans. So the thought was, how can we do this? So they